Hello ladies and gentlemen, 4.4 Phase 1 is upon us, so it's time to talk about the banners. I will only be covering Himeko Nova and the Phase 1 reruns. Honestly, I've already evaluated the Fate units a little too much in my Archer and Gilgamesh video. Please check that out if you haven't. I'll be covering the rerun and Himeko Nova's overall power, as well as their future, their value for your account, and vertical investment if you do decide to pull for them. Anyway, let's get on to the video. The first character is Himeko Nova. Himeko Nova has been very much hyped up as overpowered during the beta, and even after receiving multiple nerfs along the way, she is still taking the title completely justified. In the simplest terms, Himeko Nova is a skill-based DPS that has a specific mechanic called an assist skill. The assist skill is basically like the Echo of War, Train Attack, or the Engine of Creation. It can be triggered on any ally turn and counts as a skill itself. Using the assist skill will end the turn that you are on, unless you use it on a Trailblaze companion's turn. So yeah, she kinda has a Cyrene-ish Currency Wars mechanic. Depending on the party member, she either goes to Decimation or Verdict stance. Each stance has very strong buffs, and Himeko will use an extra assist skill completely for free if the conditions are met. For example, if you're in Decimation mode, Decimation needs you to hit 9 enemies, making it good for AoE but unusable in single target. While for Verdict, it needs the party to ult 2 times, which is functional for single target, but it's hard to consistently trigger. Assist skills are refreshed when Himeko takes a turn, and her free extra assist skill refreshes when Himeko herself uses an ult. Himeko's ultimate looks complicated, but there's really no difference if you just auto it, kinda like Acheron's ultimate. So in practice, she's a very simple character. Don't be intimidated by all of the numbers and all of the kit details. All you really need to know is that Himeko needs express units at base and has ridiculously good multipliers with amazing team buffs with her stance mechanic. Her Eidolons are also ridiculously good, with E1 increasing more assist skill procs and making her extra assist skill condition less strict, and E2 notably removes the restriction on needing to use her assist skill on a trail-based companion and gaining more extra assist skill uses on ult use. E4 makes her self-ult type res pen from skill a team-wide res pen and is even stronger. E6 makes her ult do a lot more damage. Now that we have explained her kit, how good is Himeko Nova? Himeko Nova is a unit that is very reminiscent of Finon. Due to her weak team structure, Himeko allocates almost all of the power budget the team has to herself. Due to her Trailblazer restriction, her best in slot teammates in theory are Remembrance MC, who was released a year ago, and Welt, who struggles to be impactful compared to E0 supports without going sustainless. The Welt and RMC core is a very weak team core compared to everything else, so much so that RMC can be supplemented with Mortenox Blade just because his numbers are way better. Same with Sparkle and even Ceredra to replace RMC. Himeko is an absurdly strong unit that will suck up all of the cost of her team because her entire team except for herself is almost free. And in the current day with the options that we have, investment in Himeko is so lopsidedly leaned into Himeko's Eidolons and Light Cones, while teammate upgrades are almost non-existent without a heavy opportunity cost like Mortenox Blade. This is so extreme that despite the fact that it's almost mandatory to use Welt, Himeko is a cost scamming demon if you look at the creator experience showcases, not just in Anomaly Arbitration, but obviously MOC, where Himeko Nova can 2 cost 0 cycle stages that have Knight's level HP. Himeko is not perfect though. As much as she could somehow function in single target thanks to the Verdict mode, her multipliers are balanced for AoE and pure single target is a struggle. Note that I said pure single target. In fights that switch from single target to AoE like Reaver, Himeko is very competent. In 3 targets she really is one of the best DPSs in the game, and in 5 targets she quite literally destroys everything and even has an infinite loop. This leads to the most contended part of Himeko, which is her future. Himeko is broken at the current moment despite the fact that her team core is really weak, but in the future, team upgrades are what will allow a unit to survive. Himeko will have to rely on future Express SPs for her to get an upgrade or Nova Flares. There doesn't seem to be one on the horizon, with Robin being Remembrance, and Aventurine being an Express member is unlikely but not impossible. So you do have to consider this. While an E0 SS1 Himeko is broken, if it comes down to Himeko not getting any upgrades for 3 or 4 patches, it is in your best interest to invest in her Eidolons early, because at some point she will be an E2 merchant just like Finon. Again, this isn't to say that Himeko is too expensive or that she's bad. This is simply to warn you that Himeko is a very competent DPS, but her current team might hold her down in the future, that Eidolons will be an eventual jump that you have to consider now rather than later. If you're a no limited Eidolons type of account, I don't think you should get Himeko. She's just not balanced that way to not have limited Eidolons, at least for now. So is Himeko valuable for your account? Yeah, she very easily is. It is very likely that most players actually have an E0 welt lying around that makes her function at a bare minimum, and RMC is obtainable at any time. Just as a note for anything that I say later on, just because something is easier to recommend doesn't make them more valuable. While Himeko is really easy to recommend because most accounts just have a functional team for her, you do again have to consider her future power and if you are into pulling Eidolons for her to keep up eventually. Point is, most players that are struggling in Star Wars or trying to 10 cycle MOC will see a lot of value in Himeko. She is a unit that is already not reliant on other team costs, which means that investing into Himeko's bare minimum E0S1 will feed a player that has a very underdeveloped account. She is one of the most beginner-friendly DPS, just like Finon, since her team is mostly free and her addition to the team itself is enough to boost it into endgame territory. I can see Anomaly Arbitration speedruns needing Himeko Nova now, just because her team is even more accessible than Finon, and her power level is at a much higher baseline due to being from 4.F. So if you decide to pull for Himeko, what do you need to take note of? Again, she is not a unit at the current moment that has team upgrades. Her Eidolons and signature jump is a lot stronger in practice because their team upgrades have opportunity cost. For example, replacing RMC with Mortenox Blade will make Ashvale or Acheron struggle a lot. Replacing RMC with Ceridra breaks Anaxa, and replacing RMC with Sparkle makes Archer or Finon very sad. But even if you spare those units for Himeko because it's a king stage or something, Himeko Nova's E2 is so strong because she isn't restricted to using Express members that much either. So no matter what, the best thing to do for Himeko is always her signature and Eidolons. I recommend going E2S0 or E0S1, though E1S1 isn't bad either. Himeko Sig has a lot of stats and her E1 isn't that bad, that even if you can't get to the big E2, E1S1 for now is still viable. Again, Himeko's future is very questionable at the moment, but if a new teammate does come for Himeko, we should have enough time to get pulls for the support at E0S0, so it should be fine to get Eidolons for Himeko right now. That's all for Himeko. Again, great unit, actually very broken. Most people will have a use for her, and she has really good pull value if you're a starting account. Just watch out for the teammate drought that she might experience, and I think you'll be not disappointed with her performance. Time for the reruns, and the first is Sparxie. Sparxie is a sub DPS that can sometimes main DPS if you really want to. When she released, she was one of the only counters to Elation lock mechanics, which were very annoying. As the Elation meta started to develop though, Sparxie got a bit lost in the shuffle. As a main DPS, she is obviously worse than Evanesia, who is much less matchup reliant. And as a sub DPS, Silverwolf favors her Eidolons more than Sparxie herself, that it might take a bit more time for her to be the next best upgrade. That isn't to say Sparxie is bad, because she is a pretty capable unit still, but from the words that I hear from many Sparxie players that I know, she doesn't really end up being someone that you want to pull for unless you just really like Sparxie as a character. Because again, as a main DPS, she's just not as good as the other options, and as a sub DPS, she's not required and can be patched over with Eidolons. She does still have an advantage to free up EMC, which I think is what she's heading to, but that's pretty much all I got for Sparxie. In my piloting experience, Sparxie is just fine. She can vault over annoying elation mechanics, and if you're willing to go further, Sparxie's Eidolons make her much more capable and are actually great jumps for her as a main DPS and as a sub DPS. But honestly, she's just someone who can't be recommended over Evanesia and isn't outright required, which is fine. So let's say you do want Sparxie still. How do you invest in her? Pulling for Sparxie depends on what you really want from her. As a sub DPS, she is fine with just E0S0, and as a main DPS, you obviously want her Eidolons just like Himeko. It is worth to note that even as a sub DPS, her personal Eidolons are actually still very good. E1 is more punchline for Silverwolf and rare res pen, while E2 is even more punchline and more personal damage, which does matter a lot for both sub DPS and obviously main DPS, with an extra turn that can't ever be underestimated. underestimated. So I guess it doesn't really matter, and no matter what, getting Sparxie's Eidolons are just good for whatever purposes you want from her. Much like Mono Remembrance, but to a lesser extent, Sparxie can be played with Elation Split as her own main DPS with Sparkle and Yao Guang. It does need Eidolons though, because Sparxie as the main DPS isn't what she used to be. And of course the same applies to Mono Remembrance, by the way, don't get it twisted. So yeah, that's all for Sparxie. She's a good unit. I think most of her value boils down to running Elation Split or freeing up EMC in the future, which means it might take a while for her to be the next big thing for your Elation account, but she serves her purposes well enough, I think. The next character is Evernight. Evernight is one of those units that I've experienced very late, and one of my free-to-play accounts got her in 4.0. And did she fall off? Well, despite being a late investment, I'm very shocked that she could still carry my account at 6 cost, even in 4.3, and I used E1 Tribi instead of Cyrene to make this conclusion. Evernight is a unit that is part of one of the strongest teams in the game called Mono Remembrance, either as a main DPS or a sub DPS. As a main DPS, she is very strong, able to still clear night stages despite the anti-shield. She does require using RMC, which is bad if you favor the other MC paths, but the results I think are well worth it. Funnily enough, I actually think she's better than Sparxie as a main DPS in my experience. As a sub DPS, she is irreplaceable because the amount of stats she gives is very high, and the constant jellyfish explosions help charge casters. Evernight has held up surprisingly well in both roles, and just like Sparxie, she has a distinct advantage of being able to split from casters with enough investment and converge into one team to destroy the king stage. Evernight is just very good at mid-range investment of 6 cost, and any higher means Eidolon investment, which Evernight is known to have a great advantage in. But note that I said mid-range investment. At this point, the Mono Rem team itself is fighting against the clock. If you're someone that is starting from scratch with Mono Rem, I suggest not to do so since there's stronger low-cost teams at this point, like Himeko or even Ashblade that are much more valuable. For someone like me who already has Evernight's team at 6 cost, the amount of value that I gain from Evernight's E1 is actually worth it over a new team like Himeko. If you're trying to play catch-up, I do not recommend Evernight at all unless you just really want the Pink Girls team. But for people that already have Evernight, this rerun is a blessing since she sharply jumps with enough cost. In my opinion, Evernight these days is only worth investing in if you're at a point where Eidolons are your best upgrades that you have sharp returns, which again hovers around 6 cost as a main DPS. As a caster sub DPS, you kinda want Evernight no matter what though. Let's say you made up your mind and still want to pull Evernight. First of all, Evernight is not a flexible unit. To unlock most of her power, her team needs 3 Remembrance characters at a minimum, including herself, and with HP inflation, that is even more true. As a main DPS, you always want RMC, so you just need 1 more Remembrance unit, which is either Cyrene or Hyacine. You can actually go sustainless with Evernight, by the way, but without Eidolons that will be difficult. So just like Sparxie, getting her teammates E0 S0 is fine, and then going all in on signatures and Eidolons are your best move. As a sub DPS, it's the same deal. She's fine at E0 S0, but Eidolons aren't worthless for her team. It's really difficult to go wrong with Mono Rem, so E2 Castris or E2 Evernight offers very little differences. But I will say that I think E2 Castris has more advantages for Rem split than E2 Evernight. Either way, it's really hard to go wrong with Mono Rem investment, including Evernight. Just don't pull super impositions of her signature light cone and I think you'll be fine. So that's it for Evernight. Very good unit, but at this point she has to rely on sharp Eidolon increases to catch up. And if you aren't at a point yet where the teams are already done and your next investment aren't Eidolons, then you really shouldn't go for her rerun since lower cost Evernight has a lot more competition now. Last and, well, do I consider this the least? Probably not. dhpt. dhpt is the second best sustain in the game, and at this point it's only because HSR refuses to release a new sustain for some reason. dhpt is a sustain that is pretty well rounded in utility with attack frequency and decent attack buffs and sustain capability. I've already made a video about dhpt indirectly that you can watch for more details, so I'm going to give you the basic rundown of his value. dhpt is a sustain, and as a sustain, his value largely relies relies on how much you rely on it. For an account that has multiple sustainless teams like Finon and Firefly, the HPT's value drastically goes down. Same applies for Hyacine and other sustains, but I guess if you're watching a Waveman video, this doesn't apply to you. Either way, if you're someone that relies on sustains for attack scaling teams, even if you have Huohuo, you still need a second team, which the HPT will be very useful for, even at E0. This will highly change if Aventrine's SP is an Elation sustain though. If Aventrine is an Elation sustain, it's very likely his sustain will be better than the HPT, and with the Elation mechanic, he might be a lot more appropriate in the current Elation shield environment to stop high damage mechanics. So it might be best to wait for secret Aventrine SP information over pulling now. Again, this is highly reliant on things I don't know about yet, so treat all of this with a grain of salt, especially in the investment section. So let's say you decide to pull the HPT just because, well, you really like sustains. So how do you pull for him? Well, again, unless you're Hyacine, vertically investing in a sustain is always a questionable move. While sustains are much more flexible than DPS Eidolons, sustain Eidolons are also lower impact than support Eidolons and DPS Eidolons. If you're someone that will never see yourself ever benching DHPT or running a sustainless team at all, then DHPT has good Eidolons that work with every team he is a part of, and his Litecoin can help with his flexibility. The HPT's signature is notable for being able to run Mortenox Blade due to the healing that it has. It's not perfect though, since ideally you do enough skills where the Litecoin's healing shouldn't be enough. It's a bit counterintuitive in that way, and I wouldn't pull for it purely just off that synergy. It's better to look at the signature as just a stat stick than something that could make your Mortenox Blade and DHPT synergy work. His E1 is an okay stat stick, and it's pretty good for Archer, I guess. E2 is actually a pretty nice Eidolon that just makes him a lot safer, and the additional damage this deals is actually pretty damn good too. But again, always consider that compared to other E2s like Himeko E2, Finon E2, or even Mortenox Blades E2, you might not want to go for it. The other Eidolons aren't really that good either. So that's it for the HPT. It's always hard to evaluate a sustain's value since it's a bit of a case-by-case basis. In general though, he is an almost required pull simply because there are no other sustains you could pull for with any value that isn't named Hyacine. We kinda have to wait if there will be a new sustain where the HPT might get knocked off his throne to tell if he really falls off. But for now, I think he's okay. So that's it for the video. Like, share, do the algorithm stuff. Who are you pulling for in version 4.4? Or I guess if you're skipping, just tell me why you're skipping, I guess, in the comments below. Do all the engagement stuff, I guess. Anyway, I'll see y'all next time, I guess. Bye!